This is CampusLore Live, where NFL players are the experts on college football. I'm your host, Drew Butler, joined alongside Aaron Murray. And what a show do we have for you this week. 2 top 5 teams went down last weekend. We're going to preview Week 11 across college football. And we're going to be joined by former Ohio State national champion quarterback and NFL wide receiver, Braxton Miller. Tons to talk about with him, as Ohio State seems like the cream of the crop in the Big Ten, Aaron. But speaking of cream of the crop, number 1 ranked Clemson goes down this weekend. They lose a regular season game for the first time in what seems like forever, going down to Notre Dame in 2 overtimes. The Fighting Irish win 47-40. Does Clemson still control their own destiny? Notre Dame seems like they are legitimately a top-tier team in college football.
Yeah, I think Clemson's fine. Clemson will have a chance to get their revenge, and I think with a healthy Trevor Lawrence back, post-COVID, I think that makes a huge difference, even for the offense, not just for the offense, but for the defense and that mindset. And they did not play well against this offense against Notre Dame this past weekend. So I expect that side of the football, when they get healthier, to get back to championship-type defense along with Trevor Lawrence. And don't get me wrong, DJ played tremendous at quarterback. This kid is going to be special. It's kind of unfair to watch Clemson and say, listen, even post-Trevor being the number 1 pick in the NFL draft next year, they got another dude that's going to come and most likely be a top 5, top 10 pick in the NFL draft in 2 or 3 years from now. So it's just crazy the spoils that Dabo has there at Clemson.
When these two teams match up again, presumably in the ACC championship, you got to give the nod to Clemson, right?
I think so. I really do. But I mean, good for Notre Dame, though, kind of get that monkey off their back. I mean, this is a huge win for this program who we've said for so long, I mean, just can't win the big games against the elite teams, whether it's in the playoffs, whether it's in the regular season. They just can't do it. So now I think there's a sign of relief just within that building saying, we did it. We proved everyone else wrong. We proved ourselves, too, that we can go out there and compete against the best of the best. And I wouldn't put an asterisk by it. Listen, this is football. There's injuries all the time. Teams are banged up. It's unfortunate, but listen, you still faced a very good team, a team with a tremendous backup quarterback. This is a win. This is a giant win for this program, and they're going to get another opportunity for all the people out there who say, oh, well, you won it just because Trevor wasn't playing. You won it because the defense was decimated by injuries. Well, guess what? You get to shut everyone up if you get the opportunity to play them in the ACC championship game. But listen, Notre Dame still has a tough schedule ahead of them. They got BC on the road. They got at North Carolina the next 2 weeks. You know, you're kind of maybe looking for some type of hangover after this Clemson game. You don't want to enjoy it too much because still there's a lot in front of these guys if they want to be a top 4 team at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take anything away from them. Like you just said, they went out and beat the number 1 team in the nation, something that Notre Dame has not been able to do in quite a long time. So I guess that begs the question. Is Notre Dame the best team in the country? The new AP rankings has Alabama at number 1, Notre Dame at number 2. With a win over the number 1 team in the nation, did Notre Dame deserve to jump Alabama and be ranked number 1 in the nation?
No, I think Alabama is still the best team in the country as of right now. You know, I thought Clemson was it, but obviously Clemson has shown some weaknesses over these past 2 weeks, and losing a game doesn't help that. But you know, Notre Dame is 2, and if I'm Notre Dame, I'm happy with number 2, especially the way the offense has kind of looked throughout this season. It's been a little bit up and down, but you know, they have the makings of a championship football team. You have a really good quarterback in Ian Book. You run the ball well with Williams back there in the backfield, and you got a championship-type defense, which is this year something that's rare. I mean, you look around college football right now, and defenses are pretty much extinct. So the fact that they can play well enough on that side of the football and complement it with a very good quarterback and run game on top of that, this team deserves to be in the top 4. They deserve to be number 2. I'm still going to give the edge to Alabama right now. The way they're playing on offense with Mac Jones, those receivers, Najee, and the fact that their defense really has only had 1 bad game. I know we got on them a little bit early on in the season versus Ole Miss, but defense has played well. They got studs on that side. I think they're a little bit more complete and a little bit more explosive on the offense side of the football. So I would give them that number 1 edge right now.
Yeah, quite the shakeup after 2 top 5 teams went down this weekend. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Notre Dame. 3 is Ohio State. 4, Clemson. 5, Texas A&M. 6, Florida. And number 7, Aaron, the Cincinnati Bearcats out of the AAC. Talk to me about their college football playoff hopes. They're lurking right now. They look really good week in and week out, taking care of business. Could they sneak into the Final Four over, say, a one-loss ACC champion or a one-loss SEC team that doesn't even win their game?
I mean, they're making the case right now, and I think them along with A&M were kind of hoping that Clemson would win this ball game because, if Clemson finishes the season off, wins the ACC championship game, and beats an undefeated Notre Dame, I still think Notre Dame gets into the playoffs ahead of and maybe an undefeated Cincinnati and ahead of a one-loss A&M football team. So, like I said, I think they're still hoping that at some point Notre Dame loses. I think these next 2 weeks are going to be really telling signs for the Irish. There's still a lot of uncertainty about the Pac-12. We can eliminate the Big 12. Big 10, it looks like it's Ohio State and everyone else. Indiana has been a great story, but I still don't see them being a team to take down the Buckeyes. So there is an open spot available right now. And it's going to be another question mark too, is does Florida beat Alabama? Because if Florida beats Alabama, then you can say, okay, Alabama and Florida deserve to get in. So there's still a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of teams are still vying for that number 4 spot right now. But, listen, if Cincinnati continues to do what they've been doing in a very competitive AAC, a very good AAC, it's been very good for years now. If they go undefeated, I want them in. You and I have been fighting for them to get in all season long. They deserve it. I just think for the people that are making those decisions, to put them over a one-loss Notre Dame team is going to be really hard. Or, like I said, a one-loss Alabama team, if they do lose the Florida State championship game, may be a little bit too much to ask for.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out. Cincinnati just doing what they can, taking care of business week in and week out. All right, after the break, we're going to touch on the Pac-12 being back, look into the Big Ten, and what is going on with the Georgia Bulldogs. Come on right back after this. Welcome back into CampusLore Live. Drew Butler and Aaron Murray breaking down everything going on in the world of college football. And it was a great weekend, Aaron, because the Pac-12 was back. And what a treat. A noon kickoff in the Pac-12. That's right. They kicked off at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Arizona State and USC. And then we ended the day with a great matchup out west, Stanford and Oregon. Great to see the West Coast teams back in action. Look, we are already in week 11. The Pac-12 is just kicking off. So I guess really we're just trying to figure out, does the Pac-12 have a horse that you could throw into that elite conversation for a possible college football playoff run later on this season?
I don't know about it, just because of their schedule and the fact that they're only playing 6+1. So you look at all these other conferences that are playing 10, 11 games. Even the Big 12 is playing 8+1, so they have one advantage. And you just don't know, is there going to be a cancellation? I mean, do you then have an elite team that has to miss a week, and all of a sudden now they're only having 5-6 games, including the championship game. So I just don't know if there's enough games for these guys to really feel good about it. But, the two winners of the weekend obviously were two teams that were ranked inside the top 25. Oregon had a huge win against Stanford, and then USC, which I'm with you, man. I loved the noon kickoff. And what player? It kind of stunk because you probably had to get up at 5 a.m. to get ready for the game. But it's such great exposure for the Pac-12, who, it kind of got forgotten about. I mean, they're the last conference really to get going there of all the big boys. So they need that exposure. They need to be on primetime. They need to be on at noon, at 3, at 7 to get their brand out there, to continue to try to work themselves into the playoff conversation. So really it's those two teams. And the good thing is they're not going to have to play each other in the regular season. They'd have to play in the Pac-12 championship. So if they're both undefeated at 6-0 and one wins and one 7-0, then yes, I think you can consider one of them to be into the playoffs based on what else we see. To me, if we want to talk about what we talked about in the first section of this show, if there is a one-loss Notre Dame team, I would take a one-loss Notre Dame team over an undefeated Pac-12 team, and I would take a one-loss Alabama if Florida beats Alabama over a Pac-12 team. So I think they are still on the outside looking in, kind of watching out, the ACC and the SEC, how those things shape up as we get going to the end of the season for both those conferences.
What about a team like Cincinnati? I mean, we just talked about them. Say Cincinnati's undefeated, but they're kind of on the outside, and Oregon has a convincing win over USC, so to say, in the Pac-12 championship game. Would you give the nod to Cincinnati with the body of work, opposed to a 6+1 season game for Pac-12 teams?
I mean, I would, but I'm not the one making the decision, unfortunately. In the year of 2020, I would love to see them mix it up and finally give a smaller school, a non-group of five team, an opportunity, a non-power five team, a group of five team, the opportunity to play in the playoffs and just see what happens. Just see if, one way or the other, we can maybe end the conversation, or we can even talk about, hey, listen, there was a group of five team that made the game competitive enough that, hey, maybe we talk about an 18 playoff eventually to add more teams in that deserve an opportunity to play. I just think Cincinnati has done everything they need to do. They had a great season last year. I love Luke Fickell. Desmond Ridder, their quarterback, has been tremendous, both throwing and running the football. And they have an elite defense. I mean, they check off every single box you want for a team that should make a playoff game competitive.
We always think we know how it's going to play out. We sit here and we say, this is what's going to happen. Here are the championship games. These are the teams. It never ends up that way, which is always the best way to take advantage of these Campus Lore Live episodes and breaking everything down and reacting to the craziness of each weekend. Speaking of craziness, the Big Ten, I mean, they are in big trouble. I feel like I say that every single week. Michigan loses again. Penn State loses again. Wisconsin's been off. Aaron, I mean, Ohio State is all they have. It's pretty troublesome in the Big Ten right now.
I mean, if you look at the East right now, if you would have told me 4 weeks ago as this season got going that Indiana would be the number one team in the East along with Ohio State, Maryland would be 2-1, and then Penn State and Michigan would be at the bottom, Penn State being 0-3 and Michigan being 1-2, I probably would have said you're absolutely crazy. There's no way, first off, that Indiana is going to go 3-0 to start the season off. But it's 2020, as we always say, anything is possible this season. But, listen, you watch Ohio State, they are the cream of the crop. They are an elite football team. You don't see anyone beating them this season in that conference. So, at the end of the day, all you need is one to tango. And you could have said the same thing about the Big 12. If Oklahoma State would have taken care of business versus Texas, if they would have been able to win out, most likely they would have been in the playoffs. Regardless of how bad that conference looks this season, you can't keep them out because they played a full slate of games and they won in a Power 5 school. So I think our Power 5 conference. So the same decision and same argument can be made for the Big Ten, regardless of how bad they've looked this season to start it off. They still got some good competition. It's just not the traditional teams. It's not Penn State. It's not Michigan in the East. It's Indiana and it's Maryland right now. So a little bit different. But Ohio State's still, like I said, that cowbell that's going to kind of bring it in and get them that spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's been pretty unbelievable what all has been going down in the Big Ten. But I agree with you. I think top to bottom, the Big Ten's better because of Ohio State. Ohio State's got a quarterback, by the way, who's in the Heisman contention. He used to be at the University of Georgia, and Georgia lost to Florida this past weekend, 44-28. And Aaron, they don't have a quarterback. They've opened up the quarterback competition heading into their game this week as Stetson Bennett has sustained a shoulder injury. The Dogs now have 2 losses. Their championship hopes are down the drain. Does their season spiral out of control from here, or do they kind of right the ship and end 2020 on a good note?
Well, the good thing is their schedule's pretty easy the rest of the way. They got teams like Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. I mean, all with South Carolina, very winnable games to end the season. So that's a good thing. I think for them, honestly, it's let's start preparing for Clemson. They play Clemson week 1 of 2021. You better have a quarterback to play Clemson, because if you don't, as we've seen from DJ these past couple weeks, Clemson has another stud that is ready to go out there and dominate when he is the full-time starter once Trevor Lawrence leaves. And listen, Trevor Lawrence kind of spread out there. Maybe he doesn't leave. I think he is, but you just never know. But even regardless, DJ is a tremendous quarterback there for Clemson. They're going to be a good football team. So for Georgia right now, it's time to move on past Stetson, and it's time to figure out who your quarterback is going to be for next season. Is it DeJuan? Is it JT? Is it a freshman? I don't know who this is going to be, but those guys need to start getting opportunities in games. And I would kind of divvy it up and say, listen, DeJuan, we're going to give you a game. JT, we're going to give you a game. And then after that, we're going to see who the best guy is. And then you're going to finish the season off. You'll play in the bowl game. And most likely you'll be the number one guy as figured that position out. Because like I said, I don't know if it's going to affect them too much the rest of the way this year because, they're just going to be better than all the teams they face. But you want to start you got to start preparing for 2021, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, speaking of quarterbacks and elite ones at that, after the break, we're going to be joined by our guest this week, national champion quarterback from Ohio State and NFL wide receiver Braxton Miller joins the show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're watching Campus Lore Live. Welcome back into Campus Lore Live. Drew Butler and Aaron Murray. We are thrilled to be joined by our guest this week, national champion quarterback from Ohio State University and NFL wide receiver. Braxton Miller joins the show. Braxton, thanks so much for your time. We were just talking about the quarterback position at our alma mater, the University of Georgia. We obviously wish you had some eligibility left. We'd send you down to Athens. Let's start with your Ohio State Buckeyes, led by former Georgia Bulldog Justin Fields. And, man, they seem like the cream of the crop in the Big Ten. What are your thoughts on Justin Fields so far, man? He's pretty special.
Man, he looks good, man. Looking crazy on the passing accuracy. All the guys around him making plays for him. He looked poised. He looked good back there, man.
When you look at him and Trevor Lawrence, and for so long, Trevor has been kind of the guy that, hey, when he left for the NFL draft, he was going to be the number one pick in the draft. When you watch both of them, I know you say you watch mostly Ohio State, but I'm sure you've seen a little bit of Trevor here and there. Could you see Justin Fields overtaking him to be the number one pick in the draft next season?
The jump that he made from last year to this year is very unbelievable. The sky's the limit, man. Honestly, if he keep playing the way he's playing, that shutout season like he's playing right now, I don't see there's no doubt at all.
It seems like, and I think you'd agree, that Ohio State's primed to make another entrance into the college football playoff. If it were to be next week and Ohio State were going to play in the college football playoff, who would you least want to see your Buckeyes face off against? Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, maybe a Florida?
For some reason, Clemson always give us a hard time, man. For some reason, Coach Dabo, man, he get them boys right up every time we play them. So I think that's the one that we want to get back as well, too, because that's who we lost to as well last year.
When you compare this Ohio State team to your team in 2015 that won a national championship, or maybe some others in previous years, where do you think this one ranks among all-time Ohio State teams? I mean, right now, Justin Fields has more touchdowns than incompletions. They're on a pace right now to really, really set the standard of great Ohio State teams.
I don't think the 2015 is untouchable right now. So I think that's 2012 when I played, when we went 12-0. In 2015, I think that roster is unbeatable, honestly, because that's the brotherhood, the family that we built, and the culture that we built allow the players to come in after us to continue the tradition. And so, yeah, I don't know, 2015 tough, man. I don't know if you could compare today Buckeyes to 2015.
Game this weekend versus Maryland at Maryland. Tagovailoa, the little brother Talia, starting quarterback, is playing really well these past 2 weeks. Just give us a score prediction. Does Ohio State look past Maryland? Do they come in there a little bit sleepy, or do they continue to roll?
You don't look past no opponent. So every opponent that we play, man, we want to do damage to. So yeah, score prediction. I mean, we might win by like an easy 35, 40, maybe, Easy 35, 40. My boy Justin keep doing his thing, man. We unstoppable on offense.
I'm sure they wish they could have Braxton Miller back in the fold, though. We're definitely glad that you joined us here today on Campus Lore Live. When we come back after the break, we're going to dive into Week 11, look at Ohio State's matchup this weekend against Maryland, and some other matchups across the country. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Campus Lore Live. We are back. Big thanks to Braxton Miller for joining us. Man, Aaron, I remember watching him. That dude was an absolute stud. Plenty of teams would love if he still had some eligibility left, because he would thrive in this modern age of college football. And let's look to this weekend. I mean, the slate is what it is. There's not too many games, especially coming off an amazing weekend like the last one. But Florida and Arkansas kick off in the SEC, and people may or may not forget, but Arkansas starting quarterback Felipe Franks, a former Florida Gator starting quarterback. Is this a possible letdown spot for the Gators?
I don't think so, but I think it is going to be a good football game. Obviously, big emotional win for Florida last week. This is an Arkansas team that's 3-3 and should be 4-2 based on that game versus Auburn and the way that kind of finished there. But Felipe Franks is going to come in wanting to get some revenge. The interesting thing is, heading into the game, we don't know if Arkansas will be with their head football coach Pittman. He just tested positive for COVID. He'll go through the same protocol that Nick Saban did. So if he gets 3 negative tests, then they'll consider that first one a false positive. So we don't know. I think it's a huge loss, because Sam Pittman, as we've seen, is one heck of a football coach. So if he's not on the sidelines, I think that does play a big role in this game. Someone who else may not be on the sidelines is Kyle Pitts. was injured last week during the game versus Georgia. As we saw, the offense kind of took a dip there in the second half without their star tight end out there. A little bit to do with him, a little bit to do that they were up big and kind of just trying to milk the clock and that victory against the Bulldogs. So that is a big loss for that team. I think they'll be fine. Florida's better. They're at home. And they're with their head coach. I think the head coach is a huge issue. Like I said, Sam Pittman's not there. So I think it's going to be a fun game to watch, though, in the SEC this weekend.
The game I'm probably most interested in, though, over the weekend, Aaron, and another possible letdown spot is Notre Dame heading up to Chestnut Hill to take on Boston College. Look, Notre Dame just came off a huge emotional 2-overtime thrilling win against the number 1 ranked Clemson Tigers. This is a legitimate historical college football rivalry between two Catholic schools. Chestnut Hill, Aaron, we have talked to guest after guest on this show that say Chestnut Hill is not an easy place to play. Why? Because it's a little bit quieter than what they're used to in the ACC. It's usually a little bit colder. And guess what? It's going to be really quiet this week. I think this one could be pretty close. That's the game I'm most interested in this weekend. What about you?
I'm interested in watching Ohio State versus Maryland this weekend. I mean, we talk about the Big Ten and maybe not a lot of big-time teams this season. And Maryland right now is 2-1. And, I don't think that Ohio State's going to sleep at all. I think they're a very motivated team. Justin Fields wants to continue to show out and show why he deserves to be the Heisman winner, a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. They are too focused right now, too good as a team. But, I'm really loving what Maryland's doing, especially offensively. Talia, the brother of Tua Tagovailoa, has been playing really darn good football here these past couple of weeks. So you got a very motivated Maryland football team playing against an elite team like Ohio State. I just want to see, can Ohio State week in and week out continue to put that conference, the Big Ten, on their shoulders and lead them to a berth and an appearance here in the playoffs this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to stay in the Big Ten, Aaron, for my upset pick of the week. Wisconsin coming off a 2-week break due to COVID protocols, having to put the program on hiatus, hosting Michigan. And Michigan needs a win in the worst way possible. I mean, their backs are up against the wall. I'm expecting a slow and sloppy start by Wisconsin, maybe sprinkle in a few turnovers, Joe Milton to get back on track. Michigan gets a huge win and upsets the number 13th ranked Wisconsin Badgers.
Notre Dame versus Boston College is kind of my upset alert of the week. Listen, I think if Notre Dame continues to play, no way Notre Dame plays, they should win this game. But, let's go back to what Boston College was able to do against Clemson a couple weeks ago and really push those guys to the limit. Was up big there in the first half and kind of just faded away there in the second half as Clemson was able to manage to win that football game. It was a huge emotional game for Clemson. Huge emotional, physical, double overtime. That was a heck of a ball game. So can you rebound and get ready to go? I mean, you got 2 great games on the road the next 2 weeks at Boston College, at North Carolina. And they know, listen, we're going to have to face Clemson again, most likely in the ACC championship game. We must be undefeated because if we do lose, then we're still in. So I think Coach Kelly has those guys ready to go most likely, but you just never know. Like I said, you could be mentally and physically exhausted from everything that went into the game versus the Tigers this weekend, and you got a very hungry, very talented Boston College team on the road this weekend. So I think this is going to be a fun football game to watch, and Notre Dame better be ready to play because Boston College is coming in for the upset.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why you play the game. 60 minutes, strap it up, kick it off, and see what happens. We're ready for another awesome weekend of college football. A huge thank you to our guest this week, Braxton Miller. For Aaron Murray, I'm Drew Butler. Thanks for watching Campus Lore Live.